2024 will play a critical role. And in that, you and I can play. That's the burden of what I'm going to propose. Let me therefore begin with the beginning. What is the challenge for the public? There is some sense of crisis in the country. All of us are aware of that. All of us talk about that. Our democracy is under threat, we are told. It's like an undeclared emergency, so many of us say. It is fascism, some people say. The difficulty is that the challenge that we face is so multidimensional that each of us looks at that one slice of the challenge that we can grasp and somehow latch onto it and describe the entire challenge with the help of that one slice. I would like to invite all of us to look at the multiple slices of what constitute the challenge today. I will rapidly speak about 6 kinds of challenges that come from different directions. First, democracy is under challenge. That is something I don't need to belabor the point very much. Every day, what we witness. You just have to pick up any newspaper for one single day, and you know there's something deeply abnormal here. Whether it's the conduct of independent, supposedly independent institutions like anti-corruption institutions, ED and CBC and CBI, or it is the conduct of our legislatures, or it is the conduct of our rulers, conduct of police, and I'm afraid even the judiciary. You get a sense of the fact that we are dealing with a crisis. I would not belabor this point, but I just draw your attention to 2 nuances. One is, many of us say it's an undeclared emergency. And by saying so, we think we are making a very strong point. I don't think that's the case. I think we're dealing with a situation which is much worse than the emergency for 2 reasons. One is that emergency was declared as a response to what was proposed to us as an extraordinary situation. Whether it was extraordinary or not is a different matter. But those who imposed emergency in this country, Mrs. Gandhi, she said it is an extraordinary situation, and for a limited time we are imposing measures A, B, C, D. The difficulty today is that we are not being told that there is anything extraordinary. We are being told this is what democracy is. This is not for any limited period. This is the norm. This is what democratic rule is about. That if there is an election, the ED will get after opposition leaders. This is the norm. This is normal. What's extraordinary, unusual about it? That if you protest against the government, you would find yourself in jail under some charge or the other. That if you run a media house which is critical of the government, you will be shut down or just bought. That's the law. That is the difference between the parallels, emergency and in emergency, we were being told that there was an extraordinary situation for a limited period of time. What we are being told today is this is not finite, this is infinite. This is not extraordinary, this is ordinary. And that's the most dreadful part of what we are doing. Our constitution has practically been suspended. And we are being told this is the norm. The second nuance that we need to notice about democracy is this. that many of us here, or if you go on a television channel, you have a debate, they would say, there's no emergency, nothing has been declared. That elections are taking place in this country, elections take place regularly. What are you saying? What's the challenge to democracy? Please remember that the 21st century model of killing democracy is different from the 20th century model of killing democracy. In 20th century, the model for murdering democracy was straightforward. Someone with a army uniform would walk up to radio station. We didn't have television those days, and say human rights suspended, martial law from tomorrow, censorship from the day after. That was the 20th century model. 20th century was very crude. In 21st century, we have smart models for everything, not just for telephones. We have smart models for murdering democracy as well. There's actually a book on this. There are now more than one book, but there are books about it, about how to kill democracies. And the 21st century model, incidentally, that book is not about India. The book draws mainly from Russia, from Turkey, from Hungary. And what we witness in India is absolutely a replica of that. The model for killing democracy is that those who murder democracy do it in the name of democracy. Those who murder democracy evoke the people all the time. And those who destroy democracy ensure that elections are held very regularly. Please remember, Vladimir Putin holds elections regularly. Elections will be held. Some people in enthusiasm say if we don't, if BJP wins in 24, we won't have elections anymore. No, that's not true. You will have elections because that's a 21st century model. 21st century model of dictatorship is to hold regular elections and to have predictable outcomes. That is what we are. So we are in a different model altogether. That's the first element that I wanted to draw your attention to about the challenges that we face. Second is challenge to secularism. As you can recognize, these are constitutional principles. To this audience, I really don't need to convince you that secularism faces a challenge in this country. You can see it again every single day. The point to note, again, one or 2 points we need to note. One is that this country did have communal violence even before 2014. We had not once, but several very heinous instances, 1984, 2002, many instances of this. And some BJP supporters might say that, look, we have much less violence today than we had earlier. Please remember, street violence has been replaced by invisible violence. We don't need that kind of violence anymore because a certain symbolic and absolutely routinized violence has been put in place. Now, most of us, I fear that happens even to me once in a while. You have one more news about lynching and you just pass over. Achha, ek aur ho gaya. Because it's so routinized now. This is the so violence has been routinized. Violence has been invisibilized. And for the first time, legally, constitutionally, we have created 2 tiers of citizenship. The Citizenship Amendment Act was all about instituting 2 classes of citizens, first class and second class. CAA may not have been implemented through rules right now, but for all practical purposes, almost in every police station of this country, irrespective of the party that rules. If you go and say your name is Anish, you will get one treatment. If you go and say your name is Anwar, you will get another treatment. So, for all practical purposes, two tiers of citizenship have already been instituted in the country. That is secularism. Third challenge is to the idea of federalism. Now, federalism is not a word used in our constitution, but when Supreme Court sat down to decide what is the basic structure of our constitution, they could not but mention federalism as one of those key components. We are a union of states. This country is not meant to be administered from Delhi. It has to respect the autonomy of the states. What we are witnessing in the last 10 years is systematic altering of the constitutional balance, increasingly in favor of the center in every single thing. Once again, you could say it's not unprecedented. I do remember, and many people sitting here would recall that in 1980s, the Congress Party did use its powers to put the state governments on a lower pedestal. There were assaults on elected state government in 1980s as well. What we have today is something of a different order altogether. Because what we have is for the first time a systematic attempt to alter the constitutional balance. Many constitutionalists would say that Indian federalism was already skewed in favor of the center. What we now have is a very decisive attempt to change the balance of power, almost entirely in favor of the central government. The manner in which the GST has been implemented, that leaves the state governments actually utterly powerless. They have all the responsibilities and very little money that they can generate at their discretion to be able to handle. And this entire scheme of one nation, one election, which is being proposed as an electoral reform, has nothing to do with electoral reforms. It is about changing the federal structure of the country. It is basically to redress a problem that the ruling party faces. The problem they face is that while they win at the central elections, they don't manage to win the state elections. So what's the solution? Tag them together, hold the central elections, and with that try and pull the state elections as well. So it is about one nation, one election, one party, one leader. That is basically the recipe. That is the full formula that's being enacted. So we have challenge to the idea of federalism. Fourth, I'll go over quickly because I know this can get too much, but I just want us to remember all the multiple dimensions of the challenge that we face. Fourth is the idea of socialism in our constitution, which has been observed in breach every single day. Let us not be under any illusion. No socialism of any kind has been established in this country for the last 17 years. But what we are witnessing today is an absolutely extraordinary situation. We have had earlier situations routinely of linkage between business and politics. That's not new in India. That's been happening again for the last 60 years or so. But what we today have is a South Korea-like situation where the rulers pick a few corporates, not all, and not random. Politicians being supported by businessmen at the local level is one kind of situation. But the state power deciding to pick corporate house X, Y, and Z, and then saying they will be our ambassadors to the world. They will lead a certain kind of economic development. And all the resources will be This is unusual. This has never happened. And therefore, we must pay very careful attention to the Adani saga that's playing out. It's not merely about one more scandal of corruption. I think we have a new model of corruption. And therefore, calling it Modani makes perfect sense because it is a different kind of partnership that we have not witnessed in the past. It's not, you know, businessmen making a lot of money and then trying to influence politics. Again, it's not new. The important thing about Mr. Adani and his empire is that actually not too many of us can remember having bought anything produced by Mr. Adani. About other business houses, you can remember. You bought something that they produced. You bought it, they earned profit from them, and so on. Mr. Adani's empire is not about selling. His empire is about buying. It's a very different kind of empire. And all those things have less to do with consumer and more to do with the government. Almost all those acquisitions are driven by the government. Almost all those involve element of cronyism. And not merely inside the country. Thanks to Sri Lanka, now we know that this is exactly that's what's being pushed outside the country as well. Sri Lanka, the chair of the electricity board, when confronted by the parliamentary committee, he actually admitted in a parliamentary committee hearing that yes, I got a phone call from the president's office to say that Mr. Adani should be given a contract because the president's office had received a call from the Prime Minister of India that Mr. Adani should be given this contract in Sri Lanka. This is said, this is not an informal interview, this is not a media interview, this is to the parliamentary committee in Sri Lanka. All this is, of course, pushed under the carpet in our country. But so what we are witnessing is a very different, it's not merely business and politics. It's not merely the rise of inequality, though the rise of inequality is extremely sharp. The kind of, the economists measure it with something called the Gini index. The kind of rise of Gini index that India has witnessed in the last 10, 15 years is absolutely staggering. And if you simply were to look at Mr. Adani's wealth and how it jumped the day we had the beginning of lockdown, Mr. Adani's total wealth was 66,000 crore rupees. And within 2 years, while everyone in this country lost income or wealth, Mr. Adani somehow managed to increase it by 14 times. This is not a joke. We are witnessing something very unusual in this country. So that's the fourth challenge that I spoke about. Fifth is connected to it, which is about ecology. India has not been a great example of ecological sustenance. But over the last 15, between early 80s and 2010, some minimal, a modicum of environmental laws and rules were framed to somehow slow down or at least do some elementary protection of the ecology and environment. In the last 10 years, not only have these been disregarded in practice, but even the formal apparatus, formal rules have been changed in order to allow for open plunder and destruction of ecology, whether it's coastline or forests or land acquisition, whichever. This is just complete brazen growth only model that's being initiated. And sixth and finally is social justice, which is our constitutional promise, which is what we have witnessed in the last 70 years. Again, a certain minimal architecture of a frame of social justice has been put in place, with reservations being one component and there being many other components. What we have seen in the last 10 years is a chipping away at this architecture one by one, whether it is in the name of EWS or in the name of single point roster or whatever that is called, or by way of changing rules about promotions, and above all, through very robust resistance to the idea of caste census. I know caste census can trigger all kinds of debates, and I will be very happy to answer questions on that. Allow me to skip it and just say that what we are witnessing right now is actually a erosion of the social justice framework which has come into being, and an attempt to bring the Varnashram system from the back. So I've just listed 6 elements of the crisis that we face. If we put all those 6 together, how do we describe it? What is the challenge? To say that it's challenge to democracy is true but inadequate. To say that it's challenge to social justice or secularism is true but inadequate. Putting it all together, I say that this is dismantling of our republic. Because I make a distinction between democracy and republic, and which is not a classic political science distinction. In political science, we were simply told a place that does not have a monarch is republic. That's a trite distinction. That's not a serious distinction. By that distinction, England is monarchy, we are republic. But there's something deeper about republic. Republic presupposes a political community which has shared values and which has instituted an institutional structure, rules of the game that we agree upon. These 3 things put together make for a republic. What we have today is dismantling of this. All these 6 things that I mentioned actually amount to dismantling of the republic. Those of us who read European history would remember that in France, they used to say First Republic, Second Republic, Third Republic. We keep hearing about this. So, in a sense, what's happening is that the First Republic of India that was inaugurated in 1950 is close to an end. That is what we face. It is dismantling of the republic, which is a much deeper threat than simply the dismantling of democracy. And that's why I think this moment really requires deep reflection and gathering of energies of the entire country. Because when the republic faces a threat, and if you look at the world history, whenever countries, democracies, republics have faced a serious, deep threat, then most of the existing institutions are of no use. You have a small problem, you go to police. You have a bigger problem, you go to government. You have an even bigger problem, you go to parliament. But when you have foundational problems of this kind, police, government, parliament, and even judiciary is of no use. I'm not casting aspersions on the judiciary. All I'm saying is that if you look at history, when foundational crises come, judiciary is unable to stand up to protect the constitution. So who would protect the constitution? In the last instance, republics are defended by the public. That is the only way people come onto the streets. This happened in Bangladesh, this happened in Nepal, this happened. I don't want to give the French examples and others. Look at our neighbors. We need to learn from our neighbors once in a while. Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. When public came on the streets, this is when they could defend the constitution of the republic, as and when they. We are standing at that moment in our history. So, am I suggesting coming out onto the streets? Maybe at some stage, yes, we all may need to do that. But we have one formal opportunity before, which is 2020. So let me say something about how I think we can respond to this challenge and the role that 2024 can play. Reclaiming the republic has requires two kinds of responses. One is long term, the other is short. Long term will be cultural and ideological. Short term will be political. Just something very quick about long term. I would have liked to speak long about long term, but I don't want to today because I want to focus on the short. In the long run, we must admit and acknowledge. We, the defenders of the public, we who believe in the Constitution, we who call ourselves liberal constitutionalists or by whatever name, we must admit that we have lost an ideological value. That the constitutional values that were inaugurated, those constitutional values do not enjoy that kind of passionate support from the public. There was a big cultural battle. We lost it. We are on the loser's side in that cultural and ideological battle. And therefore, the only way in the long run is to win back that ideological cultural battle. It's a long-term battle. It's not going to be easy. If BJP loses 24, which I think it can, which I think it must, that's not the end of your troubles. That's not the end of the problems for the republic. Out of power, they might even be more dangerous. All kinds of things could happen. So we have to be prepared for a very long term. At least 1 or 2 generations will have to fight it out. And this should not surprise us because those who have come to power have worked for 100 years now. So if someone has worked for 100 years, you must be at least prepared to work for 25 years to combat that, to detoxify that. The only substantive thing I wanted to say about that cultural and ideological value is this. I know many friends would disagree, and I would love to discuss it, which is that our language of constitutional liberalism is of no use in fighting this. The language that we have used in the last 70 years. You go and tell people, oh, constitution is a threat. All you would get is a big yawn. So what? Because these things do not really matter. Liberal democratic principles do not enjoy popular resonance. And the language of secularism that we have developed actually is almost counterproductive. There are 3 things that we need to recover in the long run if we wish to reclaim our republic. One is nationalism. Second is our cultural civilizational heritage. And third is religion, including Hindus. Now, all these 3 are controversial propositions. All I would say is that I think our intellectual elite has been really guilty of squandering away some of the deepest assets that this country had. Our freedom struggle gave us the kind of nationalism, deep positive nationalism that Europe had not even seen. We squandered that away. And we started feeling as apologetic about nationalism as European intellectuals do, which was a response of imitation. That's not an authentic response to the idea of nationalism. Second, about cultural civilizational heritage. I must say, with all the emphasis emphasis that might come on. That in the last 70 years, we have produced cultural illiterates in this country. This is a crime, and we all are guilty of that. Modern Indian and modern Indian education has actually made us illiterate about our own country, about our civilization, about our culture, about our languages. And the demotion of Indian languages to second rank level is cultural barbarity that we have practiced. And third, our indifference to religion and this secular arrogance that, that genuine secularism is atheist. Somehow this conflation of secularism with atheism